million black victims of Americanism are waking up, and they're gaining a new political consciousness, becoming politically mature. And as they develop this political maturity, they're able to see the recent trends in these political elections. They see that the whites are so evenly divided that every time they vote, the race is so close they have to go back and count the votes all over again. And which means that any block, any minority that has a block of votes that stick together is in a strategic position. Either way you go, that's who gets it. You're in a position to determine who go to the White House and who stay in the doghouse. You're the one who has that power. You can keep Johnson in Washington, D.C., or you can send him back to his Texas cotton patch. You're the one who sent Kennedy to Washington. You're the one who put the present Democratic administration in Washington, D.C. The whites were evenly divided. It was the fact that you threw 80% of your votes behind the Democrats that put the Democrats in the White House. When you see this, you can see that the Negro vote is the key factor. And despite the fact that you are in a position to be the determining factor, what do you get out of it? The Democrats have been in Washington, D.C. only because of the Negro vote. They've been down there 4 years. And all other legislation they wanted to bring up, they brought it up and gotten it out of the way, and now they bring up you. And now they bring up you. You put them first and they put you last. Because you're a chump. A political chump. In Washington, D.C., in the House of Representatives, there are 257 who are Democrats. Only 177 are Republican. In the Senate, there are 67 Democrats. Only 33 are Republicans. The party that you bash controls 2/3 of the House of Representatives and the Senate, and still they can't keep their promise to you, because you're a chump. Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you're dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
I appoint all those federal judges, but, thank you for serving. I'm not kidding. You want to come and make a speech? Hush up, boy. Hush up, boy. Hush up, boy. And I'm here with my senior advisor and boy who knows Louisiana very, very well. Boy who, oh man, and New Orleans and Cedric Richmond. Boy who. And what I'm going to do...
We already have a there. We don't need any more big shots.
Country is doomed. It is doomed, not just because of African Americans.
What you talking about? What you talking about? What you talking about? What you talking about, Willis?
I sat next to Strom Thurmond. No. And became friends with Strom Thurmond. Together, we passed a crime bill.
In the 80s, Biden worked on several bills with the former segregationists that established mandatory minimum sentences, raised maximum sentences, and effectively created the modern system of civil asset forfeiture, which allows authorities to seize the money and property of the accused without charging them with a crime.
Woo! Where's all this from? The government can take everything you own. Everything from your car to your house, your bank account. They can take everything. You got a gun? You commit a felony? 10 years. We already have it 5 years. Minimum mandatory. Judge can't say, you had it in your pocket, you never intended to use it, we're only going to give you 1 year. Judge has to say 5 years. Well, he wants to make it 10 or 20 or 60. We can work that out.
He wanted to remove judicial discretion for those who, quote, don't meet the middle-class criteria of susceptibility to rehabilitation.
They are beyond the pale, many of those people. They literally have not been socialized. It doesn't matter whether or not they're the victims of society. The end result is they're about to knock my mother on the head with a lead pipe, shoot my sister, beat up my wife, take on my sons. So I want to ask, what made them do this? They must be taken off the street. They are in jail, away from my mother. your husband, our families.
The Biden-Thurmond Violent Crime Control Act of 1991 would have increased the maximum sentence for 44 crimes to include the death penalty.
A wag in the newspaper recently wrote, Biden has made it a death penalty offense for everything but jaywalking.
He presented the final version of the legislation.
60 new death penalties, brand new, 60. There are 70 additional enhancements of penalties, i.e. you go to jail longer.
After his disastrous 1987 presidential campaign, Biden had staged his political comeback, in part by becoming a media darling on issues of policing and crime, and he led the fight to pass the landmark 1994 crime bill under Bill Clinton.
When I wrote the original bill that started this whole process, the so-called Biden crime bill, I didn't call a liberal confab and write it. I didn't call any big society people and write it. I called the cops.
A Democratic president wants 100,000 cops. A Democratic president wants to build 125,000 new prison cells.
I started looking at it and found out that this midnight basketball didn't get them together a bunch of jive folks who were black, white, and Hispanic, who lived in their city to do, try to see if they can be Michael Jordan. When they found out, they were keeping schools open. So gangs come off streets instead of out raping my mother, marauding me, robbing the local store. They're in a gymnasium. And my daughter will be safer, my wife will be safer, my mother will be safer, and I will be safer. And I will be happy.
Along with several laws passed in the 80s, the 1994 crime bill drove up the local, state, and federal prison populations, and it tarnished the reputations of Biden and Bill Clinton, who signed it into law.
Hey, Clinton, you want to take pictures of our people here? We're still in jail for what you did.
When Biden ran for president in 2008, he told the New York Times that he knew more people would be locked up across the board, but that it would drive down crime. In fact, crime rates were already falling when Biden pushed for the passage of the 94 crime bill, and they've continued falling as the prison population has declined in recent years.
You ashamed of that bill?
Not at all. In fact, I drafted.
Biden also admits to having been civil with Democratic colleagues who were openly racist, like James Eastland, who had a long history of racist remarks, including that black Americans belonged to an inferior race, as well as the segregationist Herman Talmadge, who vigorously opposed school integration.
Governor, this means in effect that your state would set up a private school system. We intend to maintain separate schools in Georgia, one way or another, come what may.
Biden also developed a decades-long friendship with segregationist Strom Thurmond, who he worked with attempting to pass the Biden-Thurmond Violent Crime Control Act in 1991. Biden also spoke at his funeral.
We became good friends. I'm not sure exactly why or how it happened, Nancy, but we did.
In the lead-up to the 2008 election, Biden was also in the spotlight for a number of comments, including referring to Barack Obama as articulate and clean, and associating Indian immigrants with Dunkin' Donuts and 7-Eleven chains.
Do these gaffes or misunderstandings, or however you would characterize them, indicate you're uncomfortable talking about race, or are people just being too sensitive?
I think that I have my whole career. I got involved in public policy. I got involved in politics because of the civil rights movement.
Biden also has an unreliable history surrounding his own involvement in the civil rights struggle. He has at times claimed to have been deeply involved, at other times not that active, and in the lead up to the 2020 election once again claimed to have been heavily involved. He was also caught out claiming to have been arrested trying to visit Nelson Mandela.
This day, 30 years ago, Nelson Mandela walked out of prison and entered into discussions about apartheid. I had the great honor of meeting him. I had the great honor of being arrested with our UN ambassador on the streets of Soweto trying to get to see him on Robbins Island.
You now say you weren't arrested and it didn't happen in Soweto. You were at the airport in Johannesburg and you were stopped from going through the door for blacks. I guess the question is, were you confused or were you just trying to embellish a story?
Offered the chance to run with Biden in 2020, Kamala Harris's once scathing criticisms about race faded away, and the two have worked closely since winning the election.
I believe. By the way, I sit on the stand and it get hot. I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun. And the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was straight and then watch the hair come back up again. They look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap. So if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
I think Joe Biden might be suffering from that same white entitlement and privilege and ego, where he's just that old school white male who feels like, hey, man, they need me, I don't need them, or I got.
And by the way, what you all know, but most people don't know, unlike the African American community, with notable exceptions, the Latino community is an incredibly diverse community.
It's that old school white man.
This is the worst graduation of my life. This is a campaign speech. A campaign speech. You got this white man here, Howard. What is going on? I would have given a better speech. I did give a better speech at my high school graduation. My high school graduation was a lot better than this. Really disappointed. Howard, you disappointed us. Tremendous. Like, we could have had Michael Jordan. We could have had somebody who actually did something good for something good for the black community. You feel me?
Absolutely nothing better than these kings and queens trashing segregationist white supremacist Joe Biden to his face. He puts hundreds of thousands of young black men in prison for crack cocaine and then lets his son come into the White House with bags of crack. Yeah. That's white supremacy right there. And there's also the dude who wore this on his hat, the champ.